Hello, and welcome to Florida Watch. I'm your host, Doug Miles, and joining me on the panel today are Dennis Maley, the editor of the Bradenton Times, Cooper Levey-Baker, he's the editor of the Florida Independent, as well as former CBS White House correspondent Gary Schuster. Our first topic today is the 2012 presidential candidate field. They'll be vying for the GOP nomination at their convention, which will be held right up the road in Tampa, Florida. Gary, you've had the most experience of anybody here on the panel of covering presidential primaries. What's kind of the thought process right now, particularly in the Republican Party? We're seeing jockeying right now for position. What's going to go happen the next, say, 10 months leading up to that first primary?
Well, you know, there's so many people out there now thinking about doing this. I counted 30 the other day. Everybody's running but the four of us, it seems. But, you know,
I have an announcement at the end of the show, by the way.
The thing is that nobody wants to be first. They're all sort of feeling each other out here. And so nobody has really declared, because once you've declared, then things start to happen. You're, you know, put under the Federal Election Commission's watch. There's a lot of things that happen. But there are signs that we're getting close. Fox News, for example, said that Rick Santorum, the former senator from Pennsylvania, and Newt Gingrich, the former Speaker of the House, can no longer appear on their show as analysts for the next 2 months. Starting May 1st, as of May 1st, they got to declare if they're candidates or not. If they declare, they're off that show. So the clocks are running in different places for different things. But you have everybody from former mayors, former governors, Donald Trump, Mayor Bloomberg of New York. There's a lot of people out there trying to figure out where they are in this equation. And nobody wants to be first, which is really interesting, but somebody's going to have to be.
And if you get in too early, there's kind of a fatigue factor, isn't there? I mean, if you're already announced early, people get tired of you, you may not get that momentum.
Right, that's happened in Iowa. In those first primaries, people see so many. I mean, there have already been candidates who've been to Iowa and New Hampshire 7 times already, just exploring and talking to people in coffee shops. Well, people go get tired. Oh, it's you again, you know? I mean, and that really happens. I mean, people know what's going on. They know those states, they're aware of it, and they want to, you know, they want to be loved, but they also don't want to be inundated with these candidates every couple of weeks.
Yeah, Mike Huckabee, you know, who lives in Florida here, he said the exact same thing. He said that he learned from 2008 that it's not good to get in first, you know. So that's one reason why you see him all but campaigning, but not officially. So he's going on book tours, you know, specifically to Iowa, all around Florida, these really key states. And it's a way of sort of getting the word out, campaigning without campaigning, building up buzz, but not overwhelming them, like you're saying. And he said that that was specifically something he learned in 2008. So I don't think we're going to see, you know, a host of official announcements for quite a while. I mean, at least a few months, I think, before you know, somebody like Huckabee officially announces that he's going to get in. So we'll see, you know, how that strategy plays out. I think there is an opportunity for somebody who may be more of a relative unknown at this point to come out and go first, just to sort of build some buzz, grab some headlines for a while the other ones are kind of receding. But I was really struck. Huckabee was in Sarasota last December, and this was after the November election. You know, the 2012 cycle had, you know, was not even kind of on the table yet, and CNN had a crew following Huckabee around on his book tour every single event, asking him, "Are you running? Are you running? Are you running?" So, you know, it's 2008 seemed to me like an incredibly long election, and I think 2012 is gearing up just to be this epic stretch.
I think the Republicans in particular learned something from that, because I don't think anybody was looking at John McCain as being the presumptive candidate, and he kind of seemed to be the last guy standing. So I think that was kind of the whoa. You know, we saw what happened to Mitt Romney, who started very, very strong last time. I think everybody kind of saw that dynamic. So it is interesting. But like Gary said, the real dynamic here is that it's the most crowded field ever. You know, this is, I mean, I counted about 15 who I thought, you know what, that guy's got a serious chance. So it's usually you have a whole lot of guys that just want to go out and kind of show they can raise some money and maybe use it to position themselves for other things in their political career. And there's 3 or 4 that you say, well, you know, these are guys that could maybe get the election. I counted about 15 and I thought, you know, stranger things have happened. Now, what I think the most interesting dynamic of it is going to be, though, is that it might be too hard to get out of the primary and be electable in the general election, because 2010, at least the buzz that's come from it, and the people that are thinking about running, Gingrich being most serious, I didn't think he was going to run, but I think a lot of people are saying if I'm on that really far right wing, this is the best chance I've ever had of getting into the mainstream because of what happened in 2010 with a lot of people getting elected. I think that's a mistake, because I think the worst things Republican could do is, as a party, is to nominate somebody who is going to rally the base and the moderates and the independents that might not vote otherwise. So I think that's going to be a very key, interesting dynamic. The Tea Party and these real hardcore conservatives that are very, very influential in that primary, if they're able to get a Gingrich or a John Thune or somebody like that nominated, a very, very conservative candidate, I think that makes it difficult for them in November.
Well, Senator Thune has taken himself out of this already. He's announced that he's not going to run, I think, but you never know, because somebody can talk him back into it.
Right.
Gingrich is looking at an online exploratory committee, not saying he's going to form it, but he's looking at it online, sort of testing the waters. A lot of what happens here is these candidates, some of whom become perennial, like Pat Buchanan, always ran for president. He didn't run for president because he thought he could make it. He ran because he wanted to make speeches, he wanted television appearances, he wanted book tours, and this gave him a platform for it. And you're seeing the same thing here. I think there are a lot of candidates, as you say, Dennis, who want to be vice president, who are out there campaigning for the presidency, trying to make sure they're looked upon as number two, not number one.
I want to follow up on something Dennis said too about how conservative this field can be. And I think two of the names we've already talked about, Gingrich and Huckabee, have already, while not saying that President Obama was not born in the United States, have hinted that they think his worldview is shaped by Kenyan anti-colonialism. Both candidates have made that. Huckabee most recently, Gingrich made it months ago. And I'm really struck by the tenor of those comments and the fact that they are right now front runners in this race. I mean, that hasn't started yet.
Yeah, Huckabee said that the other day in a radio interview, and then he went on, I think, O'Reilly that night and said, well, he'd done like 100 interviews. He didn't really mean what it came across, but I think it was kind of accidental.
That's also one of those things where that plays very well with the people in the primary. It's just then they got to be reminded that, wait a minute, somebody's going to bring this back in November.
Yeah. And his explanation is utterly absurd. I mean, it's not like he said one sentence and then was like, oops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that.
No, he went on for about a couple minutes.
Yeah, he explored at length, I mean, how this shaped Obama's worldview, and he wants to know where his worldview came from. And I think that, again, this is not, he may or may not be a birther, we don't know that for sure, I guess, but it's definitely like that dog whistle effect, that you are speaking to a certain class of Republican voters and you're trying to become the most conservative voice out there. And so I think that to me is really something shocking at this point in the race.
Well, if you look at it, there's about an 80% chance, based on that field, that you're going to have a nominee who denies the science of global warming, who doesn't believe in a woman's right to choose even in cases of rape and incest, who advocates the teaching of creationism in public schools and mandatory prayer in public schools. These are all things that, you wouldn't even have been thinking about a couple of years ago being a mainstream possibility. That takes care of more than half the field. So, I mean, we could see one of the most conservative nominees that we've ever seen.
Yeah, what you're going to have to find out here, too, is who, at the end of the day, pocketbook issues rule these elections. I mean, everybody says, oh, it's the foreign thing. Okay, now we have Libya, now we have, other things. But it's the pocketbook issues. And so it's who sort of know. Everybody says, well, Romney has the experience as an investment banker and he knows his stuff and he can get in there. But, well, maybe not him. Maybe Haley Barbour, because he was there for Katrina, for the governor of Mississippi. So there's a lot of people out there who are playing those kind of cards where their expertise lies. And it's whether the voters sort of latch onto that and say, hey, that's what it is, because maybe it's not all the things you mentioned. It becomes an economic issue as we go through all these problems with the states and states' collective bargaining issues. What happens at the end of the day? Is that more important than all these other social issues where the religious right gets involved or the Tea Party gets involved? You got a Tea Party candidate, Brown from Massachusetts is another one who's throwing his hat. I mean, the senator from Massachusetts who took Kennedy's place. Does he have legs? Can he make that go? Or is he just out there trying to get a speech or a book or whatever it is? He was on 60 Minutes a couple weeks ago. You can see things happening, little pieces, and you'll see form before long.
Doesn't the Republican Party, though, Gary, have to find somebody that's obviously electable in the main election? You can get somebody nominated with the Tea Party is going to have obviously a big influence, but they may not be electable for the whole country. Isn't that going to be a big issue for the chairman of the Republican Party and the power brokers behind the scenes?
Sure. I mean, it used to be the old smoke-filled room, out of Chicago with Mayor Daley anointing John Kennedy, let's say, and say, we'll back you and we'll get you in there. I don't know that you'll get to that here, but it's that kind of thing. It may take the party's hierarchy to get in and start mixing and choosing and picking because there's so many people. I remember covering the 80 campaign in the presidential primaries when Jimmy Carter was president and had a very low rating, lower than this current president's. And it brought in, I think there were 12 or 14 candidates, everybody from George Bush the first to Reagan to Bob Dole to Howard Baker to Congressman from Illinois, everybody. And at the end of the day, the primaries, John Connally, the former governor of Texas, everybody was out there in those first couple primaries. But it settled down. The people started choosing in those primaries, and I think it'll happen this time. It may not be the person the party wants. That's the problem,
Yeah, I mean, I'm struck by a few kind of comparisons that I've heard made, and particularly it seems like a lot of the experts, and I am no expert on electoral politics, but they feel that Obama's chances of re-election are pretty strong at this point. And so I'm curious, I don't know how much of an impact even who the GOP candidate is going to have. I mean, they point to specific numerical things. Obama's approval rating took a big beating last year, but it's back up much more quickly than it was under Clinton in 1995 after his drubbing, and under Reagan in 1983. So I think Obama, most experts think he's pretty well positioned at this point, and I think it's going to be really to his advantage to sort of sit back and, as these Republicans slug it out, and call for greater and greater cuts and make more and more draconian statements. So I think that right now it's tilted towards him, I think, and I think you're going to need that breakout star, whether it's somebody like Romney who can tap into economic issues. I think that's a possibility, but he's also got such a challenge to overcome, as with his healthcare reform initiative.
I think that kills him. I think the healthcare. I think anybody's able to attach and say, "Listen, you don't like Obamacare. Mitt Romney gave it to you," and they're already starting to do that. And I think that sinks his ship. I think what you're going to see is a governor. I think a governor has a tremendous advantage in modern day anyway. Look, the last guy that was successful before Obama coming out of Senate, and it was a very short Senate career. That's another thing I think you should look at. If you've been in Washington for 15, 20 years, you've got too many votes anymore, and they're too public, and those primaries and those general elections are too long. So I think you're going to see a governor, and I think right now, if you're a governor who can say, like if you're Mitch Daniels or Tim Plenty, you can say, I cut taxes or I cut the deficit or both, and I did it in my state, what you're looking to do in the country, I think those are strong financial arguments. Mitch Daniels, the governor of Indiana, gave a great speech at CPAC. George Will gave him a absolutely glowing, what I took as an endorsement afterwards. So, use the word Reagan-esque over and over. And of course, he comes from Reagan's team. So that's somebody I think that has those kind of touchstone issues. But let's not pretend that this isn't a popularity contest. This is a year-long reality show. And, look, Mitch Daniels and Tim Pawlenty aren't the kind of guys that get people excited, I don't know who that candidate's going to be. I think this is the year where it's going to be the hardest to pick it. I really think that it's going to be a difficult time to isolate somebody. Here's another prediction I'm going to make. Just like last time, the vice president is going to come from outside the field. And the reason is these primaries are going to be longer and more bloody every single time. And just like with Clinton and Obama, it's so hard at the end trying to marry that person who's been coming after you with a hatchet, for 9 months and saying you should definitely not be president, and then all of a sudden I'm going to be your vice president and say, well, you should. So I think what Gary said earlier, there's a lot to that a lot of people I think are positioning themselves and saying, hey, I really want to be on the bottom part of that ticket, so I'm going to hang in the back here and see how that goes.
Gary, don't you think, you're talking about Mitt Romney with the health care plan when he was governor of Massachusetts, can't he run now and say, well, these are the mistakes that I made back then, and this is the way I would correct it, the way Obama has done is the wrong way, I know the right way now? Can he run on that kind of a platform?
Well, he can run on that kind of platform, but the thing is, every other candidate is going to be picking on him. He's sort of viewed as one of the 2 or 3 front runners, along with Gingrich and I don't know, there might be another one here or there, but those 2 seem to be out front right now. Huckabee's there, but I don't know if he's got the staying power. But as you go, I think that's exactly right. But more and more, you're seeing these primaries. It's money based. There's not a lot of money out there for this many candidates to all have an equal kind of footing. So you're going to have to go early in primaries, get those votes, get the popularity, so the money starts to follow you. And it's going to be hard because at the beginning you don't have any. So it's a different kind of equation when you have this many people running. It sort of neutralizes the pot.
And that's been one of the comments made, is that there's been a tremendous difficulty in getting those big donors and bundlers to get in any one camp. Romney was very successful very early last time to get a lot of those rainmakers in the Republican Party to say, yeah, we're going to throw our money behind you and get you out there. Nobody's been able to do that. So I think it's a tremendous disadvantage. The reason the names we're mentioning are there, they were branded the last time around. So they've already spent millions and millions of dollars for people to know who they are. These other guys have a lot of catching up to do, but that's the problem. Nobody's been able, as an outsider, been able to come in and say, I want to line up those big dollar donors.
Yeah, that's one thing I would say about Romney, that I think he has the advantage is the money. And in fact, just this week he was spreading around money in Florida. And during the election cycle last year, he was doing events with John Thrasher, who is the head of the Republican Party of Florida. And so he's really trying to win friends here in the Sunshine State. And I think that that's absolutely part of his strategy. And so that's something to keep our eye on, is just these PACs, where their money's going.
You know, and there are candidates too who aren't running for 2012. They're running for 2016 thinking that Obama is going to be reelected because of the situation, and they're running for 2016. So there's so many different approaches here from these candidates as to, and it'll all separate out, but right now you can't tell.
We have not mentioned a name that is very polarizing, Sarah Palin. Any chance at all that she could have any electability, Gary?
I don't know. I don't think Sarah Palin even wants to run. I mean, she's made a lot of money in books and in speeches, and I don't think she even wants to be out there running. She's happier to be supporting candidates now for other offices and raising her money and getting her bank account sort of fattened. She might be a 2016 candidate. Things might settle down. She'll have a better look at the landscape. She's a young woman. Things will sort of, her daughter won't be on Dancing with the Stars. There'll be a lot of things that aren't happening to her that'll take that spotlight out. And maybe 2016 is the time, or maybe that's what she's looking at.
I think she could absolutely win a Republican primary, but the question is whether she wants to or not, and that's something that nobody really knows. And again, she's sort of has a bigger platform now. I mean, I don't even know how much a presidential campaign adds to that. So I think that I don't know. I don't think she's going to run this year, and I'm not really sure why I say that. That's just me picking at the wind.
Can she be a power broker, though?
I think so. I think the model is Newt Gingrich on that. I think Newt Gingrich was somebody that everybody saw as being polarized and unelectable for a very long time, but he was very influential in the GOP sphere. And I think that both Huckabee and Palin fit that mold. And you know what? There's a lot more money to be made on that now than there was even 10 years ago. Sarah Palin has raised her personal wealth to over $12 million just since that presidential run, on the book tours and the personal experiences and lectures tour. So there's more opportunity there. I don't think she can get out of the primary. I think she could be a player in it. I think on a national stage, she's like Christine O'Donnell was. You get her out of the primary, it still doesn't matter because you're not going to get her elected. She's unqualified and she's polarizing.
Yeah, I think the public's recollection of her is not winning and being sort of a drag on the ticket in some ways. And she has the Tea Party support, but that won't be enough here.
I remember how bad she was. I mean, remember those interviews? I remember when she couldn't name a Supreme Court case? I mean, you got to remember that right now what she can do is she can get on Twitter and she can have these controlled messages. That's another thing that is kind of different. Like with Rick Scott's campaign, you can kind of not have to face those anymore because you can reach a large audience without going in front of Mike Wallace or somebody like that and answering hard questions. You could just shape your message, just read off a teleprompter, and you could raise a lot of money doing that. But at a certain point, if you're an actual candidate for president, you're going to have to sit down in these real debates and you're going to have to answer real questions, and she's going to come off looking ridiculous when that happens.
That's what I was saying last week, that the voter does want these primaries. They do want to be able to touch and watch people in action around a table answering questions. Can you name 3 countries in Africa or whatever it might be, to sort of qualify you? Not that that's the qualifying, but people like to see that because it says, wait a minute, I don't know that I want this person sitting in the Oval Office.
I think party insiders, too, were not happy with the way that the McCain Palin bickering started as soon as Obama won in 2008, and I think that definitely has soured some opinion on her. There's this infighting, back and forth accusations about whose fault it was about the loss, and I think that did not serve her well, and I think people will remember that.
You mentioned another name, Gary, Donald Trump. Is that a serious bid, or is it just another publicity situation for him?
Donald Trump doesn't need the publicity. That's the thing. And so he
he sells more real estate every time he does something like that.
Well, maybe, but he's selling at a loss. So But the thing is, I think he likes the notoriety. He's always liked the notoriety. So I think you're going to see him continue this for a while. But I don't think he's going to be a serious. Just like I don't think Michael Bloomberg, the mayor of New York, is going to be a serious candidate. Independents would think, well, that'd be a great thing. But the feeling in the Democratic Party is that he would take votes away from Obama. So they don't want him out there. The Republicans really don't. He doesn't want to be he's been everybody. He's been a Democrat, he's been an independent, he's been a Republican. So he's sort of all over the field. So I don't think you can start to winnow this down as you go. But I don't think Trump's playing.
And back in the 80s, remember Lee Iacocca, who turned around Chrysler, was that type of guy. Well, let's put a guy like him, a great businessman, and he floated his name. But it's a similar situation, you think, with Trump? People think, well, maybe he can turn it around?
People don't take him seriously. The only thing I can say to counter that is Jesse Ventura, the former World Federation of Wrestling guy, who became governor of Minnesota. But only Minnesota can elect somebody like that. I mean, now they have Al Franken in the Senate, the comedian who's now a U.S. Senator. So that state is just a little off.
Those people in Minnesota watching, Gary's opinion, not ours.
It is my opinion. Having been there a lot, that is my opinion.
The only reason that ever happened was because they have very unique and strict campaign finance laws, and that's the only thing that allowed Jesse Ventura to come in there as an independent.
And they have this huge mishmash of parties. The farmers this, and the bakers that, and whatever it is. But it's. I mean, they even had a case one time when I was covering that kind of politics, where the governor, Andy Anderson, I think his name was, appointed himself senator. There was an opening, and he appointed himself, and he lost in at the real election because people got so mad at him. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. What happens in Minnesota. So there you are.
Dennis, at the top of the show, we talked about the convention coming to Tampa in 2012. We talked a little bit last week about the Republicans wanting to move the primary up a little bit. Obviously, the convention being here in Tampa is going to be a big influence, though, isn't it?
Well, I think, that was one of the things that I kind of thought about afterwards. If you penalize some delegates and then you got to come right back for the convention, that might sour things a little bit. So that might be one of the things that the state GOP is thinking, that, hey, we might be able to get away with this because we're hosting the convention. I don't know. Like I said, I think they're going to have to resolve this because every state wants to do it. Nobody's happy with it. But I think that might be the best time. I think Florida has one little ace in their hole that they might be able to use that for.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's it's going to be a boon for that area at least. And they're already talking about the economic projections that are going to help out in Tampa Bay. So I mean, I think it's great for the area. It's great to have somebody there. It's great for us to be able to kind of go up there and have tear gas thrown at us, that kind of thing. So I mean, we're excited to have it, and I think that it definitely could be influencing those decisions made about the primary.
Gary, as you know, I mean, we haven't had a Republican or Democratic convention that's really hasn't been decided who's going to be the candidates. Since Kennedy, right?
Right, exactly.
Is that going to change this year, do you think?
I don't think so.
Or next year?
I don't think so. I mean, to your points about what this means for the area, I've already seen ads in the paper of people renting their condos for the convention. I mean, to a year plus out, there's already the ads on Craigslist, other places for renting apartments and condos for that. And so it is going to be a boom.
And they've got it's too long. It's too late. It has to be pageantry because remember the jump McCain had on the Democrats last time, because he had about a month where they hadn't yet decided their nominee, and he was out there just campaigning. So what the Republicans need to do with this crowded field is they do need to get it worked out earlier, sooner better than later. Because if you're going to be taking on a guy with a better than 50% approval rating who's the incumbent, and remember this too, Americans don't like to vote for something different in very uncertain times. Okay, that's just a natural kind of part of the psychology that goes to it. So they're going to need to get a candidate, or they need to get them out there early enough to really build an argument there. So they're going to need to, at some point, unite. And maybe it's the money that does that. Maybe the money gets somewhere and says, okay, this is our guy. But they're going to have to unite before somebody. They can't afford to have a very long, last minute, played out, bloody, everybody comes out of it looking ugly type primary if they have any chance to win.
The Republican convention's the end of August in Tampa, and then in Charlotte, the next week or 10 days later, the Democrats. And Obama has the luxury here as being a sitting president where he's not going to have any primaries, probably, nothing serious. And so he has that luxury of sitting back, watching these many candidates start to winnow down who's going to be it, and all the fighting, all the muck, all the trouble that's going to visit many of these candidates.
Well, he's also busy governing, and I think that's the big difference, is he can point to accomplishments he's making while the Republican candidates are out there slugging each other. I think that's huge.
Gentlemen, we're coming down to the final few minutes of today's program. Let's kind of go around the table, and as we usually do, what's on your mind? Dennis, you want to lead off?
Well, we've got a big legislative session starting next week, and I think that we're going to see the future of our state really laid out in front of us, because what's going to happen with Rick Scott when he doesn't get his way? What's going to happen with that dynamic between him and the legislature? And I'm very interested to see that. I don't know.
Presidential round, 2012? I want to talk about abortion, actually. This is an issue that I think is coming to the forefront in the state legislature, and it's a really ridiculous one, I think. You see all these candidates running, pledging to create jobs, to work to help fix the economy, and yet some of the first bills that you see filed that you're going to see debated in the state legislature are efforts to restrict healthcare access for women. I think it's really shameful.
I'm still interested in this public employee issue. Ohio legislature voted yesterday, the House, by a one-vote margin, 17-16, to go with the governor's plan, the bill, and disallow collective bargaining. The Senate, which is overwhelmingly Republican, is going to pass it. They're going to send it to Governor Kasich, former member of Congress, to sign. While Wisconsin is still protesting, but it's starting to move, and it's going to move bigger, faster, and wider as we go.
And to Dennis's point about Governor Scott, a couple of representatives are filing a lawsuit about the rail situation, one from up in Tampa, so it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in the next few
and
days.
there's bills that are coming out of committee on both of those issues, on the teachers and the performance pay, and also with the public unions as well.
It's even gotten to the mayor. The mayor of Providence, Rhode Island, is going to fire all the teachers. Now he's going to hire some back, but I mean, but it's moving. It's everywhere.
We're going to see that in this session, absolutely.
We'll follow up on that on our next program. That's going to wrap it up for us this week. I'd like to thank the panel and also thank you for joining us, which of course you can do each week on METV or watch us on demand anytime at thebradentontimes.com. Until next week, I'm Doug Miles for Dennis Maley, Gary Schuster, and Cooper Levey-Baker saying so long, everybody.